Hey folks, Dave here, and I like knives. Here today to talk to you about the Zero Tolerance 0550. This thing is, well, I once opened this at a family function to help tear down a box or something like that, and I received shocked, surprised, and vaguely threatened responses from the people nearest me. So that's kind of ambiguously how big this is. Let's find out how concretely big this is. This is 0550. This is the 55 beside the Rat number 2 and number 1. The 55 beside the Delica and the Spyderco Delica and the Spyderco Endura. The others were Ontario, by the way. The Spyderco Para 3 and the PM2, and the Benchmade Griptilian and Mini Grip. I've been speedrunning this, but you can kind of see what they were talking about. This is not a small knife. And being a Hinderer design, I felt it appropriate to display it beside my other Hinderer ZTs, also displaying how this knife is on the bigger side of everything else that I've shown, but in zero tolerance land, it's not any kind of impressive. This knife being made by or designed by one of the most legendary designers that ZT works with. He's a legendary knife designer, Rick Hinderer. He makes a lot of very cool things that I've very specific issues with that aren't present here. Anyway, this really good, some partially bad, golden garbage. Let's talk about them. We're going to start up here with the pivot. This is something that I am coming to realize actually frustrates me a lot more than even I realize, but in this case, the pivot is done absolutely correct. There are 3 possible ways to design a good pivot, and this is the A** among them. This is the best correct way to design a pivot. That way when you turn that little, screwdriver knob, that can't spin at all. Awesome. The pocket clip is solid. We have a nice fold-over clip. They're not flathead screws, but they are fairly low. Obviously, again, flathead screws are the correct, but if you make them small, then fine, whatever, I guess. Very deep carry. Big fan of the clip. The branding is a little more than necessary. I hate branded clips, but whatever. Deep carry, it's nice. It holds it in the pocket. This actually did, I purchased this secondhand, by the way. This knife has been discontinued. We're going to talk about that later. But the way that the knife came, it was actually so loose in the pocket that it would slide around laterally. So what I did, I actually had to take the clip off, put a little bit more pressure on it, and now it stays perfectly. Obviously, none of the things that I'm talking about are inherently true from the factory. A lot of it. The clip, for instance, I don't know how it came from the factory. I've never handled a factory fresh one. But good clip, that's what I'm saying here. Keeping on with some of the smaller details, we have excellent jimping both here, down here at the bottom of the handle, so that it really latches into your pinky. Up here, give you a little bit of thumb traction, but not enough that it's going to hurt your thumb. None of that's sharp. And a little bit here to help you engage with the lock bar. Now, one of the things that I really like about frame lock knives, about some frame lock knives, is a little bit extra room cut out on the show side so that you can get to the lock bar a little bit easier. I like it so much actually that I took a Dremel to this other, the 620, and actually cut out a bigger space there. This knife does not do that, but it's not that big a hassle for me because the knife stock, the blade stock, is so wide that it actually does leave enough of an opening for you to be able to get there. I don't feel that that was done on the 620, but it was absolutely done here. At least for me, I have no problem with this lock bar. I just referenced it, but this knife is a little bit of a thick boy, but the blade is awesome. Wearing what Rick Hinderer calls his slicer grind, kind of distinctive with that curve right there. It is a little thick, but it's also a wide enough blade that it has time to thin out. Meaning that, behind the edge, it's definitely not meant for slicing cheese blocks or anything like that. But in a hard use scenario, this is going to cut very, very nicely. Also being made out of S35VN, titanium handles. This is an excellent knife in terms of materials, in terms of blade grind. Beautiful swedge right there, big old bold tip. Yeah, that's not a pokey tip, but it is very durable. And that's what Hinder makes his knives for. He makes them for the hard use. He makes them for the work. And this knife, this blade, was built for the work. Generally speaking, this knife is heavily overbuilt, as, again, a Rick Hinder staple. This is a solid piece of titanium, and it is thick. I don't think it needs to be that thick, but makes it a little bit heavy in the pocket, but nothing, nothing brickish, certainly. An excellent lanyard hole right there, letting you pass the lanyard through. Doesn't interfere with the pocket clip because it's so wide, you can just have both. The pocket clip also cants a little bit off to the side. I appreciate that, as well as being reversible. You can put them on either side. Importantly, this handle scale is also not factory. I forgot to mention that earlier. So, with the holes right here, I have no idea it came like this. I have no idea where this is from. But if you put a pocket clip right here, this texture would destroy your pocket. But it's from the factory. There were carbon fiber. There were varieties that were originally released in various materials that you could get that handle scale in. So on most of them, I believe that would have been fine. Down here we have something that I believe Rick Hinder himself designed, and this is the lock bar over travel stop, or stabilizer, whatever. Essentially what it means is that when you go to unlock it, as thick as this thing is, not really a risk here, or I guess as thick as that is or remains. One of the concerns is that when you go to disengage the lock, you can push it out of spring, and then you've just got a broken knife that doesn't lock or doesn't lock quite enough. What that stabilizer does is holds it in place. So you can only push the lock bar so far before it hits that, and you can't push it any further. It's a very small detail and doesn't super matter in a lot of cases, but on a knife like this, that is part of what makes it overbuilt. It is a small detail that, although I probably don't need in my life, I love, love, love seeing it, especially on frame lock knives. On liner locks, you just have the back scale to do that for you, or a bolster, same thing. On a frame, you got this, and that works. And finally, the action. Running on phosphor bronze washers, this action is fantastic. Heavy blade, you can just kind of shake it closed, and it opens really easy. This is actually something that I could not carry for a long time after I first got it, because the action was so stiff. I actually had to spend some time just sitting at my desk doing something else, just playing with it, and occasionally spraying WD-40, and then playing with it, and then spraying. What I could have done is just disassembled it, cleaned it out, put some lube on, reassembled it, whatever. I did not have the materials at the time to do that. But eventually I got it where I needed to. Also, I'm sure my thumb is much stronger than it was at the beginning of the journey, and this knife is just fun to play with. The thumb studs are a little sharp, so it does cut your finger. You can see the indentation there. So it doesn't cut your finger, but it does rough your finger a little bit. Not too terribly bad, though. I've had worse. I'd prefer that this was more rounded, but I'll take what I get. All that was gold. This is garbage. I just left off with how I fixed it, but I have to mention it because it really did hurt my finger for a long time, that this knife came out of the secondhand box from eBay very, very stiff. Not Zero Tolerance's fault. Possibly, I don't know, so I'm going to continue on. Something I did not mention is bat ears. Oh my gosh, I love, love, love bat ears. It's got, look at it. It's got a little, it looks like Batman. because the stop pin is the thumb set. I forgot to mention that. I love bad ears. The size is unfortunately something that apparently runs the risk of bothering folks around you whenever you go to pull this out. Not something that I was expecting because, again, by my standards, this isn't a massive knife. But for those uninitiated, it's big, it's wide, it's heavy, it's black. Something to keep in mind. Know your audience. Now for the three that actually matter, and that's one of them is this. The pocket clip sits a little bit closer to this is the lock bar relief. This hole, this cutout, is what allows the lock bar to move back and forth. And the pocket clip is just, it's right on that edge. What that means is that when you're pulling this knife out of your pocket, sometimes that can catch a little bit on the edge of your pocket and it eats it. Just doesn't eat the main part of the pocket, it just eats the hem. And it's really, really annoying. What I would have preferred is either, I don't know, have this hole moved up or have the pocket clip moved down, I guess. I don't actually know how this could be fixed, other than moving the cutout a little bit higher, which I'm assuming they couldn't do for engineering reasons. So, just, I don't know how they would have fixed it, but it is something that bothers me. And on to something that Zero Tolerance has gotten, and the knife world generally has gotten so much better about after this was discontinued. That is something that's missing right there. That screw right there on the right signifies the lock interface, the frame lock interface, whatever. And that screw is holding in place a small piece of stainless steel that the blade is actually sitting on. These are titanium handles. Titanium is softer than steel. So what that means is that over time of a denser, harder steel beating against a less hard metal, the less hard metal is obviously going to deform over time. It takes a really, really, really long time. It takes a long time. But over time, it is something that will inevitably happen. So, what ZT has started doing, and not, a couple of years ago, is putting interfaces on all of their knives. This was before that. So, this is something that I doubt will show up on camera, but there is just the slightest bit of blade wobble on this. There was when I got it. And that's because it's, microscopically, but there's been a little deformation happening. I've got it tightened as much as I can and still get the good action. It's just the slightest bit of deformation. Again, this is much less of a problem in the knife world now, but this is from a time before that became common practice. Zero Tolerance now makes much better quality knives for a whole lot cheaper. There's the 155, I don't know, again, it's up in the corner. It's got 20 CV, it's speed safe, but it's titanium, it's 20 CV. S35 is an excellent steel. It's one of my favorites. The 20 CV that Zero Tolerance has gone to, a little bit better, a little bit better edge holding, a little bit better stain resistance, all the good stuff. This is no slouch, just a little bit of an upgrade. And that's just a lot of money. Essentially what I'm saying is please do your absolute best to not pay over retail price for a production or for a cut. Don't pay over retail. Generally speaking, that doesn't help you, and that only helps the bad guys. That only helps the scalpers and the exploiters, and we're not their friends, and they aren't our friends. So don't. I fed them, I think. I don't know, over here. But please, don't you feed them. And that's what I got. This is a great knife that I love. That it's really disappointing that it's like a really good doctor, who washes his hands and stuff, but he's from the 1800s and doesn't understand germ theory. It's like he's good at his job, but he's missing one important element, and that really is just that. Everything else, not necessarily this knife's, well, that's bothersome. Everything else, not necessarily this knife's fault. They're just particular nitpicks that I have that do not stop me from putting this in my pocket. I do enjoy carrying this. It's a bit big, but it hides nicely. It rides in the pocket really. A little bit increased tension on the pocket clip was necessary for me, but really comfortable in pocket. Bit big, but not too terribly wide. That's the zero tolerance 0550. Obviously, start putting actual names on your stuff, but ZT's never really going to do that. So I christened the 55. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or suggestions, let me know down below. And other than that, y'all have a great day. Bye.